All right, ladies and gentlemen, this week's assignment is going to actually be an extension of last week's assignment. So you're just going to be adding on to the back 40 pasture. Only we're going to be adding some more categories, and we're going to be using some formulas, and we're going to be using some constants in order to actually calculate some things. So last week we saw Google Sheets as just a spreadsheet, just a database, something to just keep information. Now we're going to begin to actually use it as a calculator and allow it to do a lot of things for us. So here's what we're going to be doing in this particular video. First and foremost, we're going to be learning how to add sheets. So up until now, all you've seen is just one sheet. We're going to actually add several sheets down here. We're going to be looking at how do we copy and paste data. How do we add categories to it? We're going to be talking about this term called a constant, adding constants to a spreadsheet, and why is that important? We're going to be talking about formulas as well. Actually, how do we put in formulas to turn this into more of a calculator than just a data collection type deal or a data storage. We're also going to be talking about something that's very important, known as cell referencing, and also with cell referencing, absoluting cells. This is a very important key concept. We're going to be talking about how Google Sheets allocates formulas, and it actually uses that PEMDAS method, the parentheses, exponentials, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. We're also going to be looking at the concept of filtering and then also renaming sheets. So let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, the one thing that we want to talk about, first thing we want to talk about is actually adding sheets. How do we add a sheet? So we've got our original data here. We've got a particular situation where we're looking at different fields of different crops. So we have one crop is corn, oats, wheat, a couple of more that are corn, then another wheat, oats, barley, things like that. We have different planting dates. This is the day that we planted that particular commodity. How much nitrogen did we add per acre? We also are looking at when was last year's harvest, how many number of years has that particular crop been in, or that particular pasture been in a field, a row crop field. So we have a little bit of our data right here. And the number one thing that we want to do is we don't want to tamper with this data. Whenever we get raw data like that, we never really want to mess with it. If we want to add on to it, if we want to do things like that, we want to put it on a separate sheet. The reason why is if we ever mess up that second sheet, we can always go back and get our original raw data. So the first thing we want to do is actually add a sheet. So I'm going to come down here in the lower left-hand corner to this little plus. And if you see, if I hover over it, it says add sheet. So I'm going to click add sheet. It automatically creates a second sheet, and it names it something as well. It names it sheet 2. If I were to click add sheet again, it would throw off another tab down here and say add or sheet 3. So we're going to have multiple tabs, and you can click on them to go back and forth between the two. So essentially, that's how we're going to add a sheet, just by clicking this little button right here. All right, so we just added a sheet. Next, we want to be able to copy and paste this raw data. Of course, we never really want to mess with that raw data on the very beginning. So what I want to do is I'm going to actually highlight all of this information. So I just clicked on that first cell and drug over and down. So I just highlighted all of this information, and I'm going to copy it. So I can copy in a couple of different ways. I can right click and say copy, or I can use the hotkey Control C. So I could have said Control C. So I'm going to go into sheet 2. And once I'm in sheet 2, I want to go ahead and paste that information right there in right here in A1. So with that cell highlighted, I'm going to right click and I'm just going to say paste. Or as you can see, I could have used the hotkey Control V. So I say paste. So now I've got my raw data here, and now I can start actually manipulating it and doing some different things with it. So one of the first things that I'm going to want to do with it is actually add categories. That's actually the next deal on our agenda, is adding some more categories. So we talked about how did we add categories in the last assignment, and that was just by putting more information as we went across in the different columns. So we're actually going to add some more information here as well into the sheet 2. From here on out, we're not really going to be working in sheet 1. We're always going to be working in sheet 2. This is where we're going to be adding our information to. So I want to know a few things now. I want to know how many years has this particular field been under crops. I want to know what is the plant height at different times of the year. What was the plant height at harvest? What was the, and then I'm also going to put in some calculations because I want to see how much that plant is actually growing over the years. So let's go ahead and add some categories. We're going to actually add the first category of number of years in field, because we want to see how many years have these pastures been in row crop fields. We want to maybe know what was the plant height at of July 1st. So we're going to say plant height at 7-1. We are going to want to know maybe plant height on August 1st. So maybe we want to see how much this plant has actually grown over the course of a month. So the next kind of key thing that we want to know is what is the plant height at harvest. And then, well, next we're going to want to know what is our average daily gain up until July 1st. So we're going to look for average daily gain 7-1 or 7/1. So what is average daily gain? It's just how much did that plant grow on average every single day over the course of this up until July 1st. And then we're going to maybe want to know what is our average daily gain until August 1st. So is this plant increasing in growing how much per day on average, or is it decreasing? What is it doing there? Maybe we want to know that as well. And then maybe we want to know what is the total average daily gain, or the average daily gain at harvest. How much did it grow or on average per day up until the harvest time? And why would we want to know these things? Well, maybe we can look at some correlation between the amount of nitrogen that we're putting on and how much these plants are growing. Or maybe we can look at some aspects like maybe there's different pastures in which these crops actually do better on. So that could be some key important things why we want to know all this. So we just put in all of these different columns, these different categories. So we want to make sure that we designate these titles as different from our data down here. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do the same thing we've done over here. We're just going to underline it. So I'm going to press the hotkey Control U in order to underline that. So we just added some more columns onto our data, and next we're going to start filling out these columns. So I jumped ahead and filled out these columns real quick. So this is just raw data. This is just some data that we were pulling off of our field. We went out and actually measured it. So I just went ahead and inserted that information in there. There's no formulas or anything like that. That's just raw data again. And again, remember, we're always working in sheet 2. We're not working in sheet 1. We're not messing with sheet 1. We're keeping our original data the same. We're only working in sheet 2. So now that we've added the categories, let's talk a little bit about constants. What are constants? So constants are a bit of information that is going to stay the same. And in this particular case, we're going to actually have 3 constants, 3 things that don't change. The first one is our first, if I can spell, measure date. So we want to know how much did this plant grow until August, or what was the average daily gain until that July 1st date. So we want to measure this, our kind of our first true measuring date. We're going to be measuring it on 7-1-2021. And when I'm recording this video, we're in the year 2021. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as our first measuring date. Our second measuring date is going to be actually August 1st. So this is our second constant. So our second measuring date is going to be August 1st of 2021. So we have 2 measuring dates. And why are these 2 dates constant? Well, because they don't change. We've recorded all of these measurements on July 1st. They don't change. We recorded all these measurements on August 1st. They are not going to change. That's that's just the way it is. So we don't need a bunch of varying dates. We need one constant date. So that's going to be our constant. The last constant is we want current year. So we want to put in our current year because we're looking for the number of years that these fields have been under row crop. And so we've got the first one is the year 2011. The first crop is 2011. So we want to know what's the difference between 2011 and the current year, which is, of course, when I'm recording this video, 2021. So we can do a quick math and do it in our head and say, yeah, we know that it's been 10 years. The difference between the 2 years is 10. Here it's 9, and we can do that quick math in our head. But what if we just had the computer or the spreadsheet do all that calculation for us? So my third constant is what is the current year? So we can do that a couple of different ways. We can actually type it in as just 2021, and that will work, except for every time the new year comes about, this value is now going to change. So what if we wanted it to be constantly updating with what we want it to be? So we're actually going to be using a formula for that. So Google Forms or Google Sheets actually has a lot of embedded formulas. And anytime we need to start up any formula, we use, we type in the first key as the equal sign. Whenever we type in equal sign, it's telling Google Sheets we are about to be typing in a formula of some kind. And it has a lot of embedded formulas in it, a lot of ones that will do things for us. And one of the ones I'm going to show you right now is they have a lot of embedded date and time formulas. For example, if I were to type in equals today, and then I type in open parenthesis, close parenthesis, and I press enter, it's going to give me what is the current date, and that is the current date right now. So that right there is equals today. Open parenthesis and close parenthesis. All of the embedded formulas will always begin with an equal sign. There'll be a certain kind of a command, a certain word you type in, or a certain letter, or set of letters you type in, followed by an open parenthesis and close parenthesis. We can do another one where it says equals now. And if we look at an equals now is actually going to show us the current date and the current time. We could say some other ones like equals, well, then we get in some other formulas that kind of are based off of that. So for example, if we combine equals year with the word today, with the formula today, it'll actually give us the current year. So what we're doing right now is we're actually putting a formula within a formula. And don't worry if this gets a little confusing, because we're going to go through a lot more of this stuff later on. Just kind of showing you kind of how do we get that current year. So if we say equals year, and then we say today, what it's going to be doing is it's telling this, all right, I want you to take this equation and pull out just the year. Of course, it's going to be the year 2021. Now, the cool thing about this is every time we open the spreadsheet on a new day, this automatically updates. So this current year will always be the current year, regardless of when we open it. As soon as December, or it becomes January 1st of 2021 or 22, this will automatically update to 22. Some other ones, just kind of to show you, is we could say equals equals month of today. And it's going to do the same thing as equals year, only it's going to pull out the month. So we could say equals month today, close our parentheses, and it's going to give us the month. And we could say equals date of year, or sorry, equals date of today, and it's going to do the same thing. So if we say equals date of today, and I put in one too many parentheses. Actually, I didn't put in one of the correct parentheses. So if I say that, and it's giving me an error code right now. But, well, it's because I got the wrong formula in there. But, essentially, we've got these formulas that we can put in here, and they all begin with an equal sign, and these embedded formulas need an opening and a closing parenthesis. So what is this? How does this relate to this current year? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to say equals year of today, just like we did below. We're going to open and close our certain parentheses, and we're going to get the current year as another constant. So these constants are ones that don't change. They're always going to be what we use to measure off of. And we use a constant whenever we're putting in multiple formulas. We can reference one constant and keep it there. Next, I want to go into a little bit more with formulas. So I'm going to create a brand new sheet. It's going to show up as sheet 3, just like before. And we're going to be looking more at formulas and how do they work. And the first thing, like I was saying, all formulas must begin with an equals sign. Every single one. And we can use these formulas, and we can just type in these formulas in accordance with the order of operations at PEMDAS, that parentheses, exponential, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And we can use this like a regular calculator. For example, if I say equals 3 plus 2, or 3 plus 5, it's going to give me 8. I can say equals 7 divided by 6, and it's going to give me 1.16. I can come in here and I can say equals 672 plus 953 plus 5, and it's going to give me that equation. So we can use this as a regular formula. Now, it does follow the order of operations, that PEMDAS. So, as we're doing this, we need to always make sure of where our parentheses are in our multiplication and our division. So, for example, if we wanted to take an equation and we wanted to take 6 divided by 5 plus 3, the way this is going to work is it's going to take 6 divided by 5 and then add 3 onto it. Well, what if we actually wanted to take 6 divided by 5 plus 3? So, for example, if I threw in a parenthesis right there, it's going to take 6 divided by 5 plus 3, or 6 divided by 8. It's going to follow that order of operations. It's going to do what it needs to in the parentheses first, and then move to division. So we get basically 6 divided by 8, which is 0.75. In comparison, if we do 6 divided by 5 plus 3, it's going to give us a number around 4.2. Because what it is, it took 6 divided by 5, which is 1.2, plus 3 to give us a 4. So we must follow that order of operations, especially whenever you're working with this assignment and you're doing average daily gains, and we're looking at the change in something, how much does something change by. We've got to put our parentheses and follow and make sure our parentheses are in the right place. And just like normally, it's going to do our parentheses first, then our multiplication and division, and then our addition and subtraction. So make sure you follow those parentheses. Another thing I wanted to show you is cell referencing and absoluting cells. So I'm going to throw in some numbers real quick. And we're going to just do a box of 9. So we've got several numbers right there. So to cell reference, I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to simply click on a cell. What that does is now whatever is in this cell, or whatever is in this cell will show up in the second cell. So whatever is right here will show up right here. So it's kind of mirroring it, and we're going to be using that to our advantage whenever we start dealing with those constants. But one of the key things is know that it's a one-way street. This will show up what's right here, not the other way around. For example, I can change this now, and I can say this is 6. I can say this is 8, and it automatically updates it down here. But if I change this to a 1, it will not go back. So this equals that, but it's not the other way around. So let's go back to that. So we're going to say equals this cell. The other cool thing about it, this particular situation, is we can actually drag this cell referencing one way or another. So the way we do that is now that we have this cell reference, I'm going to take my mouse, put it in the lower right hand corner of that particular cell that's highlighted. And you see how it throws off these little crosshairs? That allows you to actually click and drag formulas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually drag this to the right. And you see how it automatically goes 1, 2, 3. Well, what it's doing is it's cell referencing this cell. And as I drag it to the right, it's going to move with me. And if I were to highlight these, and I'm going to take my mouse, put in the lower right hand corner of those highlighted cells, you get the little crosshairs, and I'm going to drag it down. So what it's doing is it's moving with it. So every time I click or I drag on a cell reference, it's going to move with that. So how can we use that to our advantage? Well, how can we use cell referencing in formulas first? If I wanted to add 1 and 3, I could say 1 plus this cell right here to get 4. I could say equals 4 plus 6 and get that. Or if I wanted to add this column and this column together, this cell to this cell, then this cell to this cell, I could have just drug it down. And as I drag it down, you can see that now this cell adds to this cell, and then this one will add to that one on the next row. Or let's do this in a different way. What if I wanted to add the first 2 columns together, and then I wanted to add the second 2 columns together? So now I added those first 2 columns together. I drug it all the way down. We can see that the first 2 columns are added together in all 3. And I'm going to drag it once to the right. Now what did it do? It moved with it. It shifted it. So now those 2 are added together. Those 2 are added together. And then those 2 are added together. So next I want to talk to you a little bit about absoluting cells. And how do we absolute a cell? So the way that we're going to absolute a cell is we're actually going to highlight a cell, or we're going to cell reference, let's say cell reference C1 right quick. Now, on different laptops and on different computers, this is a little bit different. But essentially, you want to press the F4 key on your keyboard. So I'm going to press the F4 key. For certain computers, you might need to press the Fn and the F4 key at the same time. On certain ones, it's a little bit different. You'll need to play around with your computer to see kind of what it does. But essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to where it has a $ in front of this row, or in front of this column and this row. So what does that do? If we get a $ in front of both and we press enter, and we drag over, drag down, it's what we call locking in that cell or absoluting that cell. It's going to always reference this C1. And if I change this C1 to a 5, all of them change to a 5 right then and there. So it's every single cell is referencing that. Before, whenever we drug across, it actually moved to where if we drug from here to here, it followed. But because we put those $ in there, it locked it in. And a $ in front of the C means we're locking in the column. A $ in front of the 1 means we're locking in the row. So what if you can't figure out how to use the F4 key? Well, there's another way. It's kind of the longer way. You can say equals, click on that cell, and then you can come in here and actually adjust this way it's typed in. We can manually type in a $ in front of each one, and we get the exact same effect. And what I did was I just typed in a $. If you can't figure out how to get that F4 key to work, you can just simply type in those $. Now, what if we want, say, to reference just the C column, but we wanted the rows to change? We want to allow the rows to change, but we want to keep that C column intact. Well, the way we do that is we're going to come in right here, click on that C1, and I'm going to press my F4 key 3 times. And you can see that now it says equal, and it puts a $ in front of the C, but there's no $ in front of the 1. So what that does is it allows the row to change because the row's not locked in. We can drag this down and the row's changing, but the column will stay the same. We see that we're constantly referencing this C column, but we can allow that row to change. Now, what if we wanted the column to change, but not the row? So we wanted to say C1, D1, and E1. We could drag that down and it will still continue to reference the same row. So we're going to say equals C1, and we're going to press F4 twice, to where now we have a no $ in front of the C, but a $ in front of the 1. It's going to lock in that row, but not the column. So we're going to drag it to the right, and we can see that our columns are changing. But now, if we drag it down, we are constantly referencing the same rows. So why is this important? Well, what if we want to add 5, 5 to each one of these, for example. What if we have a constant, and this constant is equal to 5, for example, and we want to add 5 to each one of these values? So if we were going to do that, now we're going to be using both these absoluting the cells and cell referencing and a formula together. So we're going to say equals this cell, this H1 cell, I'm going to lock it in. And then I'm going to say plus this cell right here. So what it's going to do is it's going to take 1 plus 5, where we get 6. If I drag this down, it's going to take 4 plus 5, to where we get 9. If I drag it down one more, it's going to say 7 times 5, or 7 plus 5, which is 12. If I drag it over, it's going to take all of these values and simply add 5 to it. And we can see that there. So now we can take our constants. We're going to be putting in some formulas here to where we're going to have the computer do the work for us. And we're going to be using some constants to where we're going to have to absolute that cell of that constant. So let's go ahead and see how that's going to work in with real data. So we were looking at, how do we absolute these cells? Well, now let's go ahead and do it for real. So we've got this, our information here, our table. We're now in sheet 2 with that original data that we added onto it. And we want to figure out how many years have these pastures been been in fields, into crop fields. So what we're going to do is we're going to be comparing this year to this year. So what we're going to do is we're going to say equals, and we're going to click on this constant. Now, kind of a way that I think about this is if we're going to be highlighting, or if we're going to be using a constant, or if you're wondering, should I absolute this, or should I cell reference and absolute lock in these cells, I think to myself, do I want it to move? And if I don't want it to move, which I don't want this to move, as I drag it down, I want it to continue to reference that one cell. If I don't want to move, I'm going to lock it in. So I'm going to go ahead and press F4. And it's going to throw in those dollar signs to where now it's going to be continuously referencing this constant. It's always going to have to reference the same constant, so I'm going to keep it there. But I'm going to then subtract from it the number of years in field, or the year that we put that particular pasture into the field. So we're going to click on the current year minus this value right here. Now, do I want this to change as we go down? Well, yeah, it's going to be changing as we go down, so I want it to change. So I'm going to press enter. And it asks me, do I want to autofill this? So I can press Control Enter to autofill, or I can say yes to autofill, or no. And I'm going to go ahead and say yes and autofill it down. Allow it to go down. So we just basically had the computer do a bunch of equations for us. We're going to say basically 2021 minus 2011 gives us 10. 2021 minus 2012 gives us 9. 2021 minus 2013 gives us 8. Yeah, we could have done all that in our head, but it's a lot easier to have the computer do it for us, especially if we have a long list of formulas that we need to do that. So let's go ahead and do this again, but I'm going to show you another little trick whenever we don't autofill it. So we're going to say equals this current year. We don't want it to change, so we're going to lock it in. Minus the number of years that pasture has been in the field. We do want it to change, so we're not going to lock it in. A little hint is if it's constant, you're probably going to lock it in. We're not going to autofill it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mouse and I'm going to put in this lower right hand corner. And because everything is cell reference, I'm just going to drag it. So I put in that lower right hand corner. I get this little crosshair. I'm going to click, hold, and then just pull it down. And you can see those little dotted lines show up. And wherever those dotted lines are, wherever it outlines, that's what it's going to autofill for. So I'm going to drop, and we get these same exact equations. What would happen, though, if we didn't cell reference, or if we didn't lock in those cells? Lock in that constant. So let's go ahead and do that. What if we typed in equals the current year minus 2020, or minus this value right here? We get 10 on the first one, and we drag it down. Well, we get negative 2012. Why? Because it's referencing nothing. So we say, all right, well, we need to go ahead and fix this. So we're going to say P3. Oh, that's right now. Well, this one's wrong. So we got to adjust this one again. And it takes a lot more time. So we got to learn how to just lock those values in. It saves up a lot of time. So let's go ahead and get our equation back to right. I went ahead and locked in that cell. I absoluted that cell. We're going to drag down. And voila, we get our values that quickly. Now, let's go ahead and talk about our average daily gain. So how do we calculate an average daily gain? So to calculate the average daily gain, it's going to be actually equal to the change in what you're measuring. So in this case, it's going to be change in growth divided by the change in the days. So for example, we've had a plant height of 65 now. What was our original plant height? Well, 0, because it wasn't barely emerging. So we have a change in growth, which is going to be 65 minus 0, divided by the change in days. So how many days has it been since the planting day until this July 1st? So now what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be using our constant of July 1st and plugging it in and comparing it to this planting day. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. We're going to say equals, and we're going to take the change in growth. So this originally, this first row, this first plant grew to a height of 65 inches by July 7th, or July 1st, minus, what was the original? What was the original growth? What was the original height? Well, it was 0. So we're going to take that divided by the number of days, the change in days. So we have the first measure date of this July 1st, because we're measuring everything July 1st, minus, when did we actually plant it? So we can click on this day. Now, this doesn't look right. And let's actually autofill that down. Let's drag that down. We've got some things that are way funky. First and foremost, we've got a negative here. How did we get a negative? Well, if we look, you got to remember your order of operations. It's taking a division before it ever takes a subtraction. So it's actually taking 0 divided by this value right here. Then it's going to take H2 minus that new value minus the C2. It's all out of whack because we don't have actually a change. It's going around and it's not doing the correct order. It's not doing the correct order because we didn't put the right parentheses in there. So we need to actually put in parentheses to show new growth minus the original growth divided by the new day, the first measure day, divided by or minus the old day. So we plug that in, and now we've got something that looks a lot more reasonable. So we drag that down. We autofill that. Now we've got this value right here. Well, what's going on with it? Well, it's measuring the second measure date. We're dealing with July 1st, not August 1st. So what happened? We didn't lock in a constant. You remember how I said if we have a constant, we probably ought to lock it in. So this P1, I should have pressed F4 on it. And now that I pressed F4, let's drag it down now. So let's kind of look through this. I'm going to kind of go through each one. So we have the new height minus 0 divided by the original first measure divided by our minus the planting date. That looks right. Yep, we've got our equations right now. So the key thing is make sure you follow that order of operations and lock in the right ones. So I want to go ahead and adjust these decimal places. I'm going to adjust them down just a little bit because I don't want them that long. So the way you adjust decimal places, you can either decrease decimal places here or increase them. So I want to go ahead and decrease my decimal places. So I'm just going to click on this button right here until I get to, let's say, about 3 decimal places. That looks good to me. This is a lot more clean and concise. And what is it showing us? It's showing us how fast is that plant growing. So for example, this particular plant grew on average 1.3 inches per day, whereas this one grew 0.21 inches. This one grew 0.67 inches per day from the day that it was planted until July 1st. Well, let's go ahead and calculate average daily gain next. To calculate average daily gain on August 1st, we're actually going to be looking at how much did that plant grow between July 1st and August 1st. So that plant on August 1st, that height of that plant on August 1st is now our new growth. So we're going to highlight that. Is this going to change? Yes, as we go through each row, it changes. So yes, of course, that's going to change. Minus, what was the original height? Well, the original height, or the old height, was 65 inches back on August 1st, or July 1st. We're just comparing July to August to see how much it grew over the course of the month. So we're going to close off that parenthesis. Then we're going to divide it by August 1st minus July 1st. So we take August 1st. Now, is this going to change? No, it's a constant. We need to lock it in. Minus July 1st. That's a constant. We're going to lock that in as well. So we put in our parentheses, we put in our equation, and we're going to drag that down as well. Now, here's another little trick for you. If we get into an equation right here, and as long as we have something directly to the left of it, we can actually take and instead of clicking and dragging down like we did earlier, we can double click. If we double click, it's going to autofill down like we did over here, where we only over here we had to drag it down. If we double click, it's going to autofill until the first blank cell on the left. So, which of course is right here, so it stopped right there. So that's another little quick trick for you. Again, we're going to decrease our decimal places down to 3. Now, lastly, I want to figure out what was our average daily gain up until harvest. From the time that plant was planted until harvest, how much did it grow by? So, again, we're going to take an average daily gain, which is going to be the change in growth. What was our plant height at harvest? Well, it's this cell. And is it going to change? Yeah, so we're not going to lock it in. What was the plant height when it was planted? Well, that's 0. So then we're going to divide it by the when we actually harvested it. So, or the new date, which is our harvest date. So we look and we say, all right, well, here's the harvest date. So I know it says last year's harvest, but let's just say that's the harvest date of this year, minus when it was planted. Now, is this going to change each row? Yeah. Is this going to change each row? Yeah. So then we can close off that parenthesis as well. We didn't lock anything in because everything's going to be changing from here on out. And then we can drag that down as well. And we're going to go ahead and decrease decimal places. And then, as you can see, it actually decreased it too much, so I went back and increased a couple of decimal places to where now we can look at how much is each one of these pastures, each one of these fields changing in terms of that growth. And that's actually going to allow us to look at all of that, and essentially we can put in all these formulas, and as long as we put in the right parentheses and we lock in the right cells, it makes things a lot easier for us. Now, the second to last thing I want to show you is actually how do we filter it. Now that we've got all this information, what if we wanted to filter it by which one's actually going to be growing the fastest? And I'm going to go ahead and delete that cell right there. And I want to know which is the most productive field in terms of just putting on a height of this particular plant. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this particular sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new sheet. And this one calls it sheet 4. So I'm going to go back to sheet 2. And I'm going to copy all of our information, and I'm going to even copy our constants. It's important to make sure we even copy our constants in this. And I'm going to right-click and copy. I'm going to go into sheet 4. I'm going to right-click and paste. And we've got all of our information. Nothing has changed. So what I want to do now is I want to highlight just the data. In this particular example, I do not want to highlight the constants. Whenever you're putting on a filter and using the filter function or filter icon, you never want to include the constants. So highlight just your data. Do not highlight the constants. And we're going to click on this create a filter. So we click on that and we see all these three little lines pop up next to it. And now we can go ahead and filter. So what if I wanted to filter each pasture by how long it's been in operation from youngest to oldest? So if I click right there, I'm going to say sort A to Z. So it sorts it low to high. And you can see that it actually changed those rows. It shifted those rows up or down in order to sort it right, but it also kept the same data intact. For example, row or pasture 110 was wheat before, and this was all of the current information before. So it kept the same information in the rows. It just adjusted those rows to where it needed to be. So let's go ahead and undo that. Let's go ahead and put this one back A to Z. And this was the way the original data is. Well, what if we want to measure the plant height at harvest, or the average daily gain to harvest from low to high? We want to see which ones are producing actually we want to go high to low. So we actually want to go Z to A. Well, we can see that corn is what is actually growing the fastest, followed by oats and wheat kind of compete with each other, and barley is the slowest growing plant. And now we can see that because we sorted by our high to low, and we filtered by high to low, and we sorted that, and it's actually going to show up over there, but it's going to keep those rows intact. So let's go ahead and put it back, and we're going to do one more. What if we wanted to do average daily gain from 7 to 1 or on July 1st? And I want to go, again, high to low. To do high to low, we go Z to A. Low to high is A to Z. So high to low is Z to A. Click on that, and it sorts it just like that. So what if we want to compare a couple of different things? We wanted to compare how well it was doing up until July 1st, and now we want to compare it to, say, something else. The way it was looking at harvest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here. I'm going to highlight all of that information again. All of just my, basically I'm going to copy all of that information again. I'm going to right click, say copy. I'm going to add a new sheet right here, the sheet 5. I'm going to paste my data. I'm going to highlight just my data. Again, I'm not going to highlight my constants. Throw in my filter icon. And now I'm going to sort this Z to A as well. So now I've got this information right here where of how well did it do average daily gain up until harvest. And back on sheet 4, it was this average daily gain at July 1st. To where we can leave different sheets sorted in certain ways to be able to go back and compare them in that particular regard. Now the last thing I want to show you is actually how do we name these sheets, because now we've got 5 sheets down here, and what all do they mean? Well, this first one, this was our original data. So we can call this just field. And we know that's our original data. Then we had this was where we added all of our new information of plant height. So maybe we're going to call this plant height. So how do we actually name these? And that can make things a lot easier to name them. So the way you name them is you can actually double click on the name and it can bring that up. Or another option is you can click this little arrow and say rename. So let's go ahead and let's see what did we do on this 4th sheet. We sorted by July 1st. So we're going to click right here on this little arrow. We're going to say rename, and we're going to say average daily gain on 7-1. And remember, this one was our average daily gain at harvest. We sorted by average daily gain at harvest. So we can double click and say average daily gain harvest. And what did we do on this sheet 3? Well, this was our reference sheet. This was the one that we just kind of used as a reference. So we're going to double click and type in reference. To where now, and I spelled reference wrong, but let's just call it ref. Now we can go back, and every time we open up this sheet, we can know exactly what each one of these tabs did. So this is essentially what you need to know to complete assignment number or that average daily gain assignment. Remember, whenever you get done with each assignment, always come up here and share that individual file with me when done, and make sure that individual file is in that shared folder as well. But always make sure you go through the process of saying share and then typing in my work email right there and saying send.